Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, host of Georgia Voice of College Football, Matt Green, is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you, like we do every Sunday night.
Hey man, we're back. It's January 5th as we're taping this. We had some technical difficulties. We had an episode earlier this week that's just going to be lost in the I don't even know what to call it. It's just lost in the audio, Adobe Edition space forever with some technical difficulties. But hey, we're back here tonight, and knock on wood, we're back and ready to go. But it's been weird, man. A couple weeks now without any pods, and you're still cooking with your live shows and everything you got cooking on the Georgia front for the Georgia Voice of College Football. Also, make sure folks watching us on YouTube go subscribe to Matt over there and keep up with all of his Georgia football content there. But yeah, Matt, it's been an interesting time here in college football, where we got playoff games Thursday and Friday this week, so we'll dive in more later on this week to do our actual preview for those two games on Thursday and Friday. But man, bowl season come and gone, and we're here at the tail end of the college football season and the transfer portal in full swim. You're where I was when we taped earlier, where your team just ended the season and you're like, okay, I need some time to reflect. Nope, no reflection, because you have to immediately deal with the 5 days guys can enter the portal once your team is eliminated from your bowl season or the playoffs. So how are you handling the flurry? Are you keeping up hour by hour to see what's happening with the Anthony Evans of the world, or are you just like, call me when this is all done in a couple days?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I feel, because you knew that there was going to be more guys, like the Julian Humphrey, like the portal before the season's completely over. Like, that's not the norm. It's like the norm is to go through the playoff with the team and then hit the portal. So you've already seen a couple. Yeah, like you said, Anthony Evans, Jaden Rashada was an interesting one. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, let me know when all the dust settles, because it's so hard to just make sense of so much in the portal. It's like some guys are going in the portal because of playing time. Some guys might be starters that, trying to get paid somewhere else, or just a better opportunity somewhere else, like to each their own, like an AD Mitchell, it's like, you had personal family reasons for wanting to go to Texas. So it's it's going to be a crazy time. But are we getting into Georgia's portal stuff? Should we start talking about names and everything?
Yeah, I think we dive into Georgia, because we're going to dive in, obviously, to what happened with Georgia and Notre Dame, because we taped before what happened with Georgia and Notre Dame, and we'll get into that game that Thursday afternoon, which, again, feels like forever ago now with how much is going on. But the portal, we're going to get into some Tennessee stuff here, too. It's funny you mentioned, like, the just why and trying to get into the reasons. It's just like Squirrel White, who entered the portal for Tennessee, he committed to Florida State tonight, and I think the first report was that he wants to get closer to home. He's from Alabama, so he went further from home. I think Tallahassee to Alabama-wise. So it's just like,
well, if you're from Southern Alabama, though, Tallahassee's right there,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the exact distance, but it feels like you're going east. Like, it's just one of those where you just take it for a grain of salt in terms of like, oh, player X is going to do this because of this. It's like, let's just see how the visits go and see where they ultimately end up. Like, I couldn't be a newsbreaker, Matt. Like, I could not be the transfer portal reporter for the Tennessee Volunteers. That would drive me nuts all day long. Just like, oh, we're here and he might be here and he's narrowed it down to 3 and this guy's maybe doing. I could not be on my phone and do that all day long. Salute to the good folks who do it all over the country, but sir, I could not.
Yeah, I hear you there. We just like to give our opinion here.
Oh, also, can I give a grinds my gears take? I don't mean to step on your turf here when it comes to the grinds our gears segment here on this very program, Matt Green. But can I throw this out here? Because I know this is going to happen on broadcast next fall because they're going to be on TV some. They might be pretty decent. Justin Wilcox has got a good thing going at Cal. He's perfectly solid with a capital P, capital S for that program. Um, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Jaron Saga. I don't know how to pronounce it. Do you know the 5-star?
Oh, that is going to Cal. The
Yes.
signed with Oregon, but it's going to go to Cal.
Saga Polu Tulele, I think. And he's a Hawaiian kid, 5-star kid, Southpaw. So I already like him, Southpaw kid as a lefty. But he obviously commits to Oregon. He's in the Oregon jersey for the Rose Bowl a couple days ago, and now he's flipping to Cal. I've already seen like Julian Sayin has been referred to as an Ohio State transfer from Alabama. And that's going to happen if he's QB1 next year. They're going to be like the Alabama transfer. He was there for a month, and we're calling it a transfer. He wasn't even starting his freshman year. And you saw this with Quinn Ewers. We're calling Quinn Ewers a transfer.
Ewers was at least enrolled for a football season.
I mean, it was the senior year of his high school
season.
On
the jersey. He had the jersey.
It's the spring semester though. Like we're being very like I don't know. Are we going to call Jaron a transfer, like an Oregon transfer? Is that going to be heard on every broadcast for the next 2 years at Cal?
Sayin was never actually at Alabama though, right?
I think he enrolled. I think he was enrolled.
Because, I mean, he was by the spring, he was already at Ohio State. I mean, Nick Saban retired, January. Was he like in
Saban began practicing as an early enrollee with Alabama during the 2023 season in preparation for the 2024 Rose Bowl. He entered the portal on the 19th.
A little bit more than this guy.
I'm just saying, like on the broadcast, folks, can we just all as college football fans just say, this is just a flip, and he was committed and then flip. This is such a nitpicky thing, but it's going to annoy me because I'm like, Quinn Ewers isn't really a transfer. Like transfer is like you get a year. You can't be a transfer unless you do a full year somewhere else. But if you're like I don't know.
Quinn Ewers was on the football team though, like for a football season. So it's like he does count. It's just kind of like he counts the same way like a Justin Fields counts, It's like that's
I don't know.
Justin Fields obviously got on the field, but it's a little different.
But yeah, that's just my grinds my gears because I saw that and I'm like, we're gonna call this a transfer, aren't we? We're gonna call this a transfer.
Also, for the geography people, Pinson, Alabama is where Squirrel White is from. It's in the greater Birmingham area, which is not South Alabama. And it is roughly 5 hours from Tallahassee, and I'd say roughly 4 hours from Knoxville. So so there you go, bud.
It is closer than you would think, though. Just the Florida, Bama to Tennessee.
Maybe it's an easier drive. Okay, maybe you don't know.
Well, for the good folks who are familiar here, the Southern listeners, we're both Georgia guys. I've made the trip from Georgia to Tallahassee. I have many family members who went to Tallahassee, visited one of them years ago. And, the drive down there is a boring one, I will tell you. But northern Florida and South Georgia and Alabama and a lot it's kind of the same. Like there's not a lot, there's a lot more crossover there. So I think it's a different feel, different vibe in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, northern part of Georgia. But I think culture-wise, I think North Florida, maybe even a little bit of Central Florida, South Georgia, and Alabama. I think that's probably I think there is more overlap there.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it, man.
I don't know. It's one of those. It's one of those things. Well, Matt Green, excuse me. We're gonna get into some dog bites here before we dive into the grand scheme of things. We got a lot to talk about here on tonight's show, sir. But let's start. We'll get into some Vols stuff here momentarily. But before we do that, the dogs are on the clock, and the dogs and the Vols, we're going after the same receivers. Both have a big need at receiver, different kind of need going into 2025. Both did not get what they needed out of the receiver position. Georgia and Tennessee, both in need of some help and a bounce back year in that regard. But the Branch Bros, Zion and Zachariah Branch, Zion being a safety, Zachariah being a former 5-star from USC, they commit to Georgia today, sir. So let's start there. What do you make of the Branch brothers committing to the Dogs, and how big is this?
I think it's massive. Just because this was, two positions of need for Georgia. Losing Dan Jackson at safety and most likely Malachi Starks. Although he had some sort of message about thinking emoji like he's coming back. I don't know. Malachi Starks is a projected first rounder. Didn't have a great year this year, but still probably a first rounder. So I'd be shocked if he came back. I think safety was a need for Georgia. So to get Zion Branch and Zachariah is a dude that has, popped at times. Like this dude, he looks different, just like one of these Kadarius Toney types or something, just like the way he moves and kind of had a career. Maybe you could probably compare to Kadarius Toney because it's like he's kind of flashed his first couple years and people are kind of waiting for him to break out because of what the talent they've seen, but he hasn't really had that year yet. So I'm curious because obviously people see the 5-star label and they think oh, Georgia's got a superstar, but he didn't necessarily have that good of a year last year, especially compared to what you thought he was going to do after a pretty good freshman year. So I'm curious to see how he's used in Georgia's system, but Georgia loves to throw those screen passes, and they didn't have anyone that really made plays after the catch this year. So a guy like that in Georgia's system, and then, maybe they get a Colby Young back, who knows what happens with his legal issues, but they kind of think they're going to get him back. It seems like if he was practicing and things like that. So, and that's a big body receiver that this team was definitely missing to make contested catches. So it's to get both of those guys in a package deal, I think is pretty massive.
And let me also say, because Noah Thomas, I think, was there over the weekend. I think I saw that was reported. Yeah. He's a big, 6'6", 6'5", receiver out of Texas A&M. Big-bodied outside guy, because you talked about Colby Young. That's still kind of up in the air what his 2025 situation looks like for the Dogs. But, that's another huge under-the-radar potential ad. You get Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch out of the portal here. That's big time, I think, for Georgia, remaking this room with 5 good freshmen coming in. You got Nitro Tuggle back. Lennon Humphreys is back. Arian Smith is gone. Anthony Evans is, I think, entered the portal. I think Jackson entered the portal. Dylan Bell's back. But it's kind of annoying. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Matt
Taylor and CJ Wiley coming in as true freshmen.
Let me go ahead and tell you. I'm going to be annoyed if Tennessee misses out on both Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas to Georgia, because I would have very much liked both, and I think both would have fit in major positions of need for Tennessee, because I think Tennessee is where Georgia was without the portal additions, where Georgia's really excited about their freshmen. Georgia's got some young pieces to get excited about. Tennessee's got a lot of young pieces to be excited about. Mike Matthews coming back in, who we'll get into in a second. That's big to hold on to him. But Tennessee's got a lot of upside, but they're all underclassmen outside of Chris Brazzell, who was transfer from last year. That it's kind of because if you look at the list here, Matt Green, Zachariah Branch was the last big fish in the portal here at the receiver position, and it's filled up pretty quickly. And I mean, there's still some playoff teams playing, so we'll see who else might potentially still enter the portal. But there's not a lot of options, and if Georgia's able to, because that was one of the worries, and I want to posit this to you, is I think one of the thoughts was, the conventional wisdom was, the portal being open at this time kind of screws the playoff teams who have a deep run, because they're behind the 8 ball in terms of making additions to next year's roster, because they're focused on playoff games. They can't be focused on adding positions of need for the next season. And
they also have guys that are on their roster that are not in the portal yet that are going to be.
Right. And clearly probably dealing with tampering while they're trying to keep them focused on all that. So it's a weird time. But then if you're Georgia, to still be able to potentially add Zachariah Branch, and we'll see what happens, like I said, with Noah Thomas, I don't know. I feel like this is a pretty unbelievable scenario for Georgia to be kind of behind the 8 ball and to land 2 gigantic additions at the wide receiver position out of the portal. If that's what happens, you got 1 in the boat and you might get 2. But are you surprised that Georgia's been able to kind of quickly get ready for this and add these potential big names this late in the process?
Well, for one, they haven't gotten Noah Thomas yet.
Right.
So, I mean, they had Dane Key visited Georgia.
True.
Nick Singleton visited Georgia, and so they didn't end up getting
Eric
either
Singleton.
of those guys. So Eric Singleton.
Yeah.
both of those guys visited and were targeted. So maybe Georgia does get Noah Thomas, and that would be massive. It's kind of crazy, like dealing with pro football and free agency. It's like there's 32 teams, right? And maybe half of them will be interested in a guy. It's like this in the Power Five. It's like, who knows? Like maybe Purdue is going to break the bank for somebody, and all these different schools have different NIL setups and everything like that. So it's just kind of crazy how many more options these guys have in a free agency type of deal. But I mean, it's understandable if you look at Georgia. I mean, they're a team that had led the SEC in passing yards in 2022 and 2023, and then Beck did lead the SEC in picks. Well, did he end up? He may not end up leading them, but he led the SEC in touchdown passes. So it's like Georgia's clearly a team that's been throwing the ball a lot, and they clearly have a huge, glaring need at the wide receiver position. So if I was a guy out there that was looking to be at a big time program where the opening is there for a lot of catches, like Georgia's definitely that spot.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other transfer portal wish list here, Matt Green? Is there any other names that have piqued your interest? I saw the Maddox kid. He ended up at Florida, and I think he was rumored to be someone Georgia might add at the safety spot.
Safety from UAB.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did see that guy. Just slowly, where did he start? He just slowly has just moved his way up the college football world. Respect to him.
That might be more common going forward.
Yeah, because I think it was Alabama State, I want to say he started at, and then UAB, and then now Florida. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of needs when you look at Georgia. Like, obviously, we're talking about the wide receiver position and how bad it was this year. Personally, I think some of it's got to be bad luck. Like dropping 37 balls in a season, like it seems like, I don't know, everything going wrong. Obviously, Arian Smith was the number one culprit of that, but he wasn't alone. Don't let people let you think that it was all Arian Smith. But maybe it's an addition by subtraction type thing. Like Arian Smith, Dominic Lovett, going on to the next level. Not bashing him here by any means, but maybe you just get some guys in next year that can, I don't know. It started to get contagious at a certain point. Like it was weird. So you look at like Georgia's offensive line. Like Georgia's offensive line was not good this year, but like, is Georgia going to find better guys in the portal? Like, I don't know that those guys are there. So I think you just kind of trust that you've recruited some big time 4s and 5 stars on the offensive line and just throughout the roster for that matter. So I think you just kind of assume a lot of guys are getting a year better. I mean, Georgia did have the number 1 class in 2024. Like those guys were true freshmen this year. Like you could see a lot of those guys, take a step in year 2. So, we'll see. We know what kind of guys that Georgia gets, and especially the receiver recruiting they did in this class. Like they landed a couple of big time guys in this 2025 class. So I don't really know. Noah Thomas was the one I was gonna say as far as a guy is kind of linked to Georgia and the immediate need at receiver. But yeah, outside of that, I'm not sure what Georgia's gonna do. The other aspect of this is the quarterback position. Like Carson Beck's going pro. Jaden Rashada is now in the portal. That's a guy that a lot of people, I think expected to compete for the job next year, just because the former 5-star status and actually has some college experience. But from what people say that are close to the program, it sounds like Ryan Puglisi was actually the number 3 behind Gunnar Stockton. Like apparently when Gunnar Stockton came out in the SEC championship, Puglisi was the one that was warming up before Carson Beck was able to come back in and hand the ball off. So I guess maybe it's just a case of Rashada knew this job next year is between Stockton and Puglisi, and maybe Georgia feels good about both of those guys, and they don't need to go to the portal. But you've seen Kirby go to the portal for backups just to build depth. So I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia tries to just find a quarterback to fill out the roster. Because, I mean, would that be the only 2 scholarship quarterbacks if I'm not Puglisi and Stockton?
No, you got Montgomery coming in.
Okay, yeah. So that would be the third, a true freshman. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a guy like with D2 experience or something like that, FCS experience, end up being like the 3rd stringer at Georgia.
Well, they were interested in the Charlotte quarterback who ended up at Florida. and then Fernando Mendoza, the Cal quarterback who ended up at Indiana. So clearly they do have interest in adding another guy to that room. And I mean, this is something we'll get into in a second, but in terms of how it looks with Puglisi versus Gunnar this offseason, if there's a true competition, that kind of thing, that could shake out some stuff too. You just never really know in that regard. But I mean, it's pretty interesting what Georgia's going to do here. But I think if you're a Georgia fan, you have to be excited about how they're approaching the wide receiver position. I guess to me, the final thing is like, and then we'll get into the ball side of things. It's just, I do wonder on the offensive line how they approach it, because that's like the weirdest thing to me is they really struggled on the offensive line this year. They struggled against Notre Dame, and it was just kind of weird because it's not like a lack of talent. And I just wonder if they do go portal a little bit on the offensive line, because they really haven't. They've just recruited so well in the trenches. They haven't had to do that. And like Fairchild, Green, all those guys. I mean, you're bringing in Juan Gaston from Westlake. He should be a really good player. Tennessee was in on him.
6'8", 380, I think he.
Yeah, who's the
weighed.
6'10" guy who they've got there? What is his name?
Oh, Jaw Jackson.
Yeah.
The former football player or former basketball player.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got internal options, but I do wonder if Georgia looks to see what out there. But I've always said that you never want to be in a position where you have to look at tackle in the portal, because there aren't many good tackles, elite tackles anyway in the sport. The good ones aren't getting out. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just the teams that have them are paying them whatever. Like, it's a premium position. Like, that is a premium paid position.
But I mean,
in the sport.
Like we said earlier, like there's a lot of reasons guys go to the portal. You know, maybe they just get unhappy about who their coach is or whatever.
I'm just wary about any tackle or big time. Like, Lance Hurd was different with Tennessee because like it was a very rare situation where, I mean, he was behind two NFL tackles. Like, he just couldn't play. Like, LSU had the two best tackle combination in college football. So it was like, he's not going to play and he wants to play. So it makes sense. And we'll see what it looks like. But it was rough year one for Lance Hurd. He did not grade well for PFF this season at Tennessee. So we'll see what year two looks like for him. But I don't know. The best way of building these offensive lines, you look at Ohio State's offensive line. You look at Notre Dame. You look at Georgia over the years. You look at Texas. It's in-house guys. Like, it's you want to be able to build within the high school ranks in terms of the offensive line. But I am curious if Kirby goes outside for any support in that regard, because it was just kind of weird that they struggled as much as they did offensively on the offensive line.
It really, I can't make sense of it. Like, if people want to fire, Stacey Searles or something, on message boards, it's like, I don't know. I think I'm sure the guy knows what he's doing. As far is he as good as Matt Luke? Probably not. Is he as good as Sam Pittman? Probably not. But I mean, those guys aren't available right now. So, I tend to think, it was a bad year. I don't know why necessarily. Monroe Freeling was a big time 5-star. Like, it seemed to kind of give the offensive line an upgrade when he kind of starting at left tackle down the stretch over Ernest Green. But that Notre Dame game, he just got absolutely whooped. So, in terms of the run game, like, that was the case the whole season. It was like, even when ETN looked good, it was like despite the offensive line not creating the most holes. Like, it was a very uncharacteristic year in the run game for sure.
Absolutely. Well, on the Tennessee side of things, so Branch, the reason we bring that up to start is that was, I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're hoping that you get a visit, because he doesn't end up visiting Tennessee. Tennessee, it's complicated because it's just, I've written about this week. Like, Tennessee, the biggest thing is you got Mike Matthews from entering the portal. So 5-star, Parkview stand-up, Parkview legend, Mike Matthews. And look, it's big to get him back. But you look at this room, and I mean, Amari Jefferson, he went to Baylor. He's a Chattanooga kid. He was sports star at Baylor. He enters the portal from Alabama. He didn't really play this past year. He was down to Bama and Tennessee when he was in Mike's class and Boo Carter, and was a talented group, and he ended up picking Bama over Tennessee at the end. But he's in the portal. Pete Nakos and Steve Wiltfong gave predictions for Tennessee to land Jefferson out of the portal. But he's another guy who super talented, blue chipper, but it's not anyone who has done anything to this point. And I think what's so interesting about the spot that Tennessee currently finds himself in is I think it's fair to be optimistic that one of Braylon Staley, who's a 4-star South Carolina kid, he'll be a redshirt freshman next year in the slot. He's got the most upside since Jalen Hyatt at that position, and we'll see if he can crack that spot here in 2025. You've got Mike Matthews, who I would assume is going to be penciled on the outside. So he's going to get a lot more playing time. Chris Brazzell back in year 2. You saw Dante Thornton make a big jump in year 2 in this program. You saw Brew McCoy make a big year 2 jump. It is happening. It does seem like for some guys it takes 2 years to get really acclimated to this scheme and get comfortable. So there is potential for a Brazzell breakout. But Brazzell had a rough year this season with Tennessee. So but he also had maybe the best catch of the season for Tennessee in the Alabama game. So we'll see what that looks like. We got a long way to go there. But my question is, and this is something that I'm sure is complicated for Tennessee, is that I think it's because you struggled so much passing the ball this season, especially vertically. You're 94th in passing in SEC play. It was tough. If it's a good year for Nico, this is the last year for Nico, most likely in a Tennessee uniform. You spent and invested a lot in bringing Nico Iamaleava to Tennessee, and in year 2, the gamble, just because of what I talked about, where like Branch is now off the market, it doesn't look like Thomas is a possibility. You look around, and a lot of guys are already committed. A lot of the big fish are spoken for now. So you don't really have a choice. Like, even if you bring in Jefferson, like, that's nice. Like, I like him as a player. I liked him coming out of Baylor. But that's a lot of underclassmen. It's a big gamble on a lot of young guys. And it's fair to expect one of them to pop. Maybe 2. Maybe. But that's asking a lot. It's just, there aren't many Jeremiah Smiths out there. There's not many of those kind of players. And it's going to take some time. But like, I'm a believer in Mike. I'm a believer in Braylon. Those guys, we'll see what happens. But the fact that it's just kind of barren out there in terms of older guys, like this room it was down to Brazzell and Staley a few days ago, Matt. And you're bringing in 3 blue chip freshmen, highlighted with Travis Smith Jr. out of Westlake. I like him a lot. He's a big bodied receiver. He fits position need. He might get some snaps. I think he has to get some snaps outside. He's an early enrollee along with Rodarius Jackson out of Memphis. But I am concerned that Tennessee is kind of behind at the receiver position in the portal, because you lost so much in the portal that the depth is a question for me, where I like the young guys in the room, but I don't think it's a good spot to be in to put so much pressure on these young guys when you have had really back-to-back poor offensive passing seasons. So much pressure on Nico going into this year, like after kind of a okay year, but he finished really strong. Like I said, second half of Alabama on, Nico was a good quarterback. But you're asking a lot of Nico to help develop these guys, because he's going to be a redshirt sophomore next year. So you're surrounding him with one upperclassman as of this recording with Chris Brazzell. Like, it's a lot of youth. You're losing Dylan Sampson. The best player in your offense this past year is gone to the NFL. I don't know. You're losing 4 starters in the offensive line. Cooper Mays is not your center anymore. I have some questions about, and I think it's fair to be like, there's a lot of turnover on this side of the ball. I think the wide receiver room in particular, had to get better this offseason, and I think they let some guys go they needed to let go so they could make room for these young guys to get more opportunities that are just more talented and should get these opportunities. But you need that combo that Georgia's doing, where Georgia's bringing in those guys, bringing back Nitro Tuggle, bringing in the Taylors, and also giving more opportunities for their guys. They've already been there, but bringing in some vets. Like, doesn't mean all the vets are going to work out. Like, you saw Rara Thomas did not work out. Colby Young, but you have to have some kind of balance in terms of some vets in the room along with these young, talented guys to help them along. So I don't know. I'm a little concerned in terms of what's now available down the stretch here, because like spring portal guys, they don't, generally speaking, make a difference because you just miss so much. You're going to be behind the 8 ball if you join in the spring portal for Tennessee. So I don't know. Tennessee to me is just kind of in an uncomfortable spot at receiver, where it's not the young guy's fault, but I think there's just going to be so much pressure on them to be really good and come make up for what happened this past year and really the last 2 years. And I think it's asking a lot with a really, really young wide receiver group, the youngest that they've had in the 5 years Heupel's now been at Tennessee.
Yeah, and how many of those guys that are spring portal guys are guys that have already gotten beaten out wherever they are, and that's why they're back in the portal. Tennessee definitely has a need at wide receiver, but I'll say one thing. I kind of think Tennessee, their receivers weren't good this year. I kind of think their receivers are being scapegoated, like retroactively as after the season's over, because so many people predicted Nico to be like this superstar last year and he wasn't that. It feels like revisionist history that's like, oh, well, the receivers were so bad. That's why Nico was so bad. It's like Nico came along as the season went on. I want to say what was like the Kentucky game, the one where they like he could have had like 4 touchdowns in the first half.
That was a Kentucky game. Yeah, there was 2 drop touchdowns.
Yeah, there was 2 drop. It's like that was like the 8th or 9th game of the season. It's like there was a lot of first half or so of the season where guys were running open downfield. Nico was just missing those deep shots, like missing like almost all of the deep shots, you know? So I feel like Tennessee's, while they do have to get better, especially, you know, losing Squirrel White to the portal. And like you said, how many scholarship receivers they're down to, they obviously have to get better. But I feel like the 2024 group is kind of getting retroactively like overhated on.
Dante Thornton was really good for Tennessee, but he wasn't available enough for Tennessee, but he was a really good player. And Dante Thornton, they're going to miss. Like, he was a difference maker in a lot of big games and is the reason that Tennessee got one of the bigger reasons, underrated reasons that Tennessee got to 10 wins this year offensively. I mean, I think they're scapegoated in some ways, but because it's not like it is disingenuous to put all of the offensive blame for Tennessee in 2024 on the receivers. Like, it's just not. Yeah. It's not all their fault. Like, the offensive line, the tackles were 2 of your lowest graded players per PFF this season, and John Campbell and Lance Hurd. Dane Davis struggled too. So when your tackles have a rough year, your quarterback is learning, and he's super young. Like, Nico went through some learning curves, which is natural. He was the only underclassman Power 2 quarterback in the college football playoff. Like, he was learning, redshirt freshman. It's just what it is. He was learning on the job and went through his ups and downs, like a lot of young quarterbacks go through.
Tennessee fans, it's natural. Everything's fine. It's perfectly fine.
I think everything is fine. Nico, I'm not worried about Nico. Nico's the least of Tennessee's problems. My bigger concern is, I think Tennessee's receivers lacked explosion and did not. It's my whole thing where it's like Nico wasn't throwing guys open, but guys weren't getting open, and then the guys that were, like Ches Nimrod, weren't coming up. Like, he had the bad drop against Kentucky, and then he didn't really factor in. Now he's at USF and reunited with Alex Golish and Cody Burns down there in Tampa. So you wish them the best. You wish Chaz Nimrod, Squirrel White, Caleb Webb, Nathan Leacock, all those guys the best, but the production wasn't there. Like, there's a reason that Tennessee is doing a turnover here, and Mike Matthews is getting a big shot, and Braylon Staley is going to get a shot in the slot, and that Tennessee is wanted or was looking at the Zachariah Branch of the world. That I just, the position has to get better. But man, if they could get one more year of Dante Thornton back, that would be very nice, because he's off to the NFL and Brew McCoy's out of eligibility, but it's just, this is a young room. But I think it's also fair for fans to be like, yeah, no, the receivers outside of Dante Thornton did not have a great year. Squirrel White was injured a lot. A lot of it was out of his control, but Squirrel White was injured. Brew McCoy was banged up and not the same guy he was before his injury last year in the South Carolina game. The production wasn't there for a young quarterback who needed a lot of help, which is fair and natural, and he didn't get it from the guys around. He got it from Dylan Sampson, but there were games where the offensive line really let him down. There were games where the receivers let him down. Sometimes it was on Nico, but I don't know. Nico's the least of my concerns, because I think he's played really good football down the stretch for Tennessee, and I think he'll be fine. But do I have questions about who he's throwing to? Do I have questions about how much they're putting on these young receivers and how much pressure they're going to be under going into 25? Yeah, because look, Tennessee, look at the Tennessee 2025 schedule. They're going to Gainesville, haven't won there in forever. They're going to Tuscaloosa, haven't won there in forever. They get Georgia at home early. They get Oklahoma at home in November, Oklahoma's got the second number 2 Heisman favorite in John Mateer, who put up bonkers numbers at Wazoo this past year. Ben Arbuckle follows him, the OC there. Oklahoma, I mean, it won't surprise me at all if Oklahoma's offense is really good next year, and that's a tough game. I mean, Oklahoma, I don't know. I'm not penciling that one in as a win either. You open with Syracuse, who was really good with Fran Brown this past year in Atlanta to kick things off. Tennessee, the odd number years for Heupel have not been as smooth sailing. The Joe Milton year, you go 8-4, and 2 years ago with this schedule, and then in 2021 you go 7-5 in the regular season. So the 2-10-1 years were the years that you got Bama and Florida at home, and you don't get that this year. So I think if you have a college football playoff expectation, Tennessee's gonna have to win some games they shouldn't. And I think to do that, the receivers have to be a lot better. The receivers have to get open. The receivers have to deal with physical coverage against the Georgia of the world, who, they're feisty. The Georgia corners, they're a physical bunch. And Tennessee's got to figure out a way to get open against teams like that and have those explosive plays. The explosive plays weren't there again in Athens this year. The explosive plays weren't there in the first half for a whole month, where Tennessee was shut out for a month. So it's a combination of things, but I think it's fair if you're a Tennessee fan to be concerned about how much youth is in that receiver room, and you can still feel good about the youth you have and be excited about those guys, but also be worrisome that the portal is kind of filled up. Like, look, here you go. This is a great way of explaining it. Eric Singleton, Auburn. Zachariah Branch, Georgia. Kevin Concepcion, A&M. Micah Hudson, A&M. Dane Key, Nebraska. Nick Anderson, LSU. Barryon Brown, LSU. Kevin Coleman, Mizzou. That's the top, 10 receivers who entered the portal, all going SEC just about. Outside of Deuce Robinson, who's kind of a hybrid. He goes to Florida State. But a lot of big-time programs in the conference went out and got big-time names in the receiver room. Like A&M addressed the need. LSU addressed the need. Georgia addressed the need. Auburn addressed the need. Tennessee doesn't have anybody as of yet. So I don't know what's going to happen there. We'll see. The portal's not closed yet. And like I said, there are going to be some other guys like Isaiah Horton, another guy. Miami, he goes to Alabama. He's from Murfreesboro, went to the powerhouse Oakland. You're like, maybe they get on him, or maybe they can get on Micah Hudson. Like, none of it's happened. So those guys are all off the board. And it doesn't mean that they were going to be like game changers for Tennessee this year, but I think you needed one to feel good about like where things stood with the vets and just have a little bit more balance. Because right now it is a full on youth movement, and Tennessee's passing game has to be better. Like, there is a huge amount of pressure on Heupel and the staff to clean up the vertical passing game, because you were very close to losing Matthews too. And who knows what this looks like and what kind of pod we're having, Matt, if Matthews enters the portal this week and they're down to 2 scholarship receivers from a season ago, because I just don't know what they would have done if they had lost Matthews. Like, they just couldn't lose him. Like, you don't have any other options. Like, I like Mike, and I think he can be really good here, but you could not lose him. There's nothing else in the portal right now.
Warm bodies.
I mean, it's going to be a very, very interesting spring and summer, and just how they're going to go about this, but we shall see, Matt Green. College football playoff, though, happened here a couple days. Georgia playing in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame. Matt, now that you've had a couple days to really think about it, like, what happened in this game, and what was your biggest surprise with how this game went for the Dogs against the Irish, and why they ultimately lost this football game?
So I will say, as far as to start this off, there's like kind of a story about, what about the teams with the first round buys and the extra rest? And that is an absolute like non-story. Like, all 4 teams that won were favored by Vegas. Like, the playoff is seeded weird. 2 were double-digit underdogs. 1 is playing without their starting quarterback, and the other one lost to Ohio State. So it's not really. This is what it is. So I just I want to put that out there. I've seen that like, oh, is this a problem? Like the MLB playoffs? Like, no, it's not the same thing. So what I was most surprised about, I will say, is the fact like Gunnar Stockton, it didn't really seem like a game plan was like made for Gunnar Stockton. Like the way he played in the second half of that Texas game, and like the quarterback run game was like a big part of Georgia's offense. And I felt like that was like opened up the run game for their ETN and Frazier in that game. So that was the most surprising thing to me, is that Gunnar Stockton like really didn't make an impact in the run game. And obviously it's not like super surprising that Notre Dame shut Georgia down, because Georgia's run game hasn't been good this season most of the year. But I think the way in which like it was surprising to me, because I thought you were going to kind of see a different approach because Gunnar Stockton was at quarterback.
How did you think Gunnar ultimately played? Because I've seen different perspectives on this. Some Georgia fans have been like, he was really, really good. Some were like, it's kind of shaky. Some were like, I kind of hope we have an open competition with him and Puglisi. Very different kind of players. Obviously know about the history. I mean, you could hear, like, Kirby loves Gunnar. Bobo loves Gunnar. Like, the guys, the teammates love him. But, I mean, it is curious, because it's like, does he have a higher upside than Puglisi, who has that more Matthew Stafford type skill set and approach and build and all that kind of stuff? So I don't know. Like, what do you think about how Gunnar ultimately did? And do you think the fan reaction and your perspective was similar to what other people thought when it came to how Gunnar played in his first start?
I don't know exactly what the fan reaction is. Like, I don't know if you can, if there is a consensus, just because like I feel like Carson Beck got so much hate throughout the season that like people saw Gunnar and were like, he played pretty good. It's like if Beck played like this, you would be roasting him, So it's
Why do you say that?
just because, I mean, what were his numbers? Like if Carson Beck is 20 of 32 for 234, a touchdown and no picks, and Georgia's offense puts up 10 points, people are going to be blaming Carson Beck. It's like that's significantly worse than most of the games. Not significantly worse, one touchdown, no picks, but like 234 yards would probably be Carson Beck's low of the entire season. You know what I mean? So that, like, this was how I put it. Like, two things can be true. Gunnar Stockton played absolutely as well as you could expect him to play in this game. And also that Georgia probably wins this game with Carson Beck. Like, that's not to blame Gunnar Stockton for this loss or anything. Like, he played as well as he can play. He's QB2, but like there's a reason he was QB2, in my opinion. Like, I think if you get down 17 points, what was it, 20-3 after that kick return to start the
17
second half?
points in like a minute.
Yeah, it's like if you get down in a deficit like that, like Carson Beck has done that all season and come back from these the entire season. Like, this was Georgia's, what was it? I wrote it down here. I think Georgia's 8th game of the season where they had 7 points or less in the first half. And in those first 7, they averaged 20 points a game in the second half. And I guess Stockton is the quarterback for one of those, the second half of SEC's championship. But there was a lot of games where Georgia got off to a slow start, and then they end up scoring. I mean, like that stat I had most of the season, like Georgia played, I think, 10 Power 5 competition, Power 4 teams this year and scored 30 or more against 8 of them. So, like, as bad as the offense seemed at times, like Carson Beck, I personally felt like this game was like, should have been like the apology to Carson Beck. It was just like, look, oh yeah, you're seeing Gunnar Stockton. Yeah, they're dropping passes and they can't run the ball. It's like, yes, that's literally been Georgia's offense the entire season. And this team found a way to win the SEC with the most difficult schedule in all of college football. Like, Carson Beck deserves a bunch of credit for that, especially in a year where Georgia didn't even have one of their better defenses they've had in recent years either. So and that's not to just roast Gunnar Stockton, because I think the way the game played out, like, Georgia can win this game with Gunnar Stockton. And so personally, my biggest takeaway from this game, and I want to preface this by saying Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football. Don't want him fired. Don't want his seat to be hot. Don't want him under pressure, especially when you consider like what was going on with his dad, who's now passed, and the complications with surgery that he knew about, going into that game. So this is not to roast Kirby Smart or anything, but I felt like this was like the one game of the entire 9 years Kirby Smart has been the head coach that I feel like Kirby was the reason Georgia didn't win this game, because down 6-3 at halftime, I felt like what was the Texas score? Was it 6-3 at halftime? I feel like it may have been 6-0. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to look it up, but it's like Georgia's been playing that way the whole year. Like I told you, like that's the 8th game where they've scored 7 points or less in the first half. 6-3 with your backup quarterback. You were sustaining drives. Like obviously ETN had the turnover, the fumble when you won one of your better drives inside the 10-yard line. But you were running the ball pretty well. Your defense was playing phenomenally, and you had a backup quarterback. Like you just want to shorten the game. 6-3 is a winnable game. I felt like with 35 seconds, I think, left in the second quarter, Georgia's got the ball on their own 25-yard line. In my opinion, you just need the ball right there. Like just sit on it. Notre Dame only had 2 timeouts. Georgia did have 2 timeouts at that point, but like you can run the ball 3 straight times, run a little toss sweep or something that can potentially break yardage and see what happens on first down if you want to be aggressive. But to just drop back and pass with Gunnar Stockton in that situation, it just didn't make any sense at all to me. I feel like 6-3 was that game going perfectly according to plan. You go into the second half and you feel good about where you're at. And so to get that strip sack, and then all of a sudden it's 13-3 at halftime. They take the kickback to start the second half. Now it's 20-3. Like the kickoff return to the house happens. Like that, whatever. That's not Kirby Smart, but just to put them in that 13-3 hole, it just was not, the risk was not worth the reward. Like, do I really think Georgia's picking up 40, 50 yards right there in 30 seconds to get into field goal range? Like, I don't know if there's anything that would really, it's not like Gunnar Stockton had played poorly, but just, are you really trusting a guy with 0 experience to get you in a 30-second drill like that? Like, I personally don't think so. If Carson Beck's the quarterback, I think it's a different story if you want to be aggressive.
Yeah, what's weird too is like in the moment it was one of those where you're like, what are you doing? Where they rear back and put the ball in Gunnar's hands right at the end of the first half to throw the ball, and you have the fumble, and I mean he coughs it up, and obviously it ends up being a devastating moment because like the kickoff return, I mean he was a dangerous kick returner. Like that happens, it shouldn't happen, but I mean, look, it is what it is. But
yeah, it's 13-3 early in the second,
right?
And
like you're okay there, but it felt like a backbreaker at the time because you fumbled and gave up another score right before the half where you just needed to like run the ball, just kneel it and get out of there. I didn't understand because you know where the offense is going. The offense, like you said, has struggled in the first half all season long. They're not driving down the field 80 yards and scoring on Notre Dame in that spot. Like I didn't understand the logic in that moment, and I think a lot of fans went at Bobo for it. But
especially
I don't know,
because the previous possession, like it's one thing if the offense is feeling it,
Yeah.
The previous possession, Georgia gets it back with like 3.5 minutes left in the second quarter, and they pass it 3 straight times. I think take off like 16 seconds or something, and that gives the ball to Notre Dame, and they're able to go on that like 2-3 minute drive and get a field goal to take the lead before the half. So it's like you already kind of gave up the lead before the half by trying to be aggressive with like 3 minutes left. Now with 30 seconds left, it's like the tone of the game. Also, it's like things aren't going like great right now. We're sitting at 6-3. This is a win. Like, let's go to the half and get back in the game, because it just changed the game in so many ways. Like if it's a 16-3 game, 16-10 game in the third, fourth quarter, like Georgia's not having to go for it on some of these fourth downs that they went on. Like the defense, like I can't say enough about how well the defense played. Like outside of the one play, 12 yards touchdown, like right before the half, like this defense, I had it pulled up here. Notre Dame had 9 offensive drives, 5 punts, 3 field goals, and a turnover on downs. Like 3.4 yards per play. The field goal drives, they had a 49-yard drive for a field goal, a 32-yard drive for a field goal, and a 29-yard drive for a field goal. And obviously a 13-yard drive for a touchdown. It's like the defense was not allowing anything really. And so other than Riley Leonard on the ground, like what did they end up with, like 240 yards or something, I think, at the end of this game? Like Georgia's defense played well enough to win it. Gunnar Stockton played well enough to win it. I just feel like Kirby is usually like the offensive line did not play well enough to win it. Don't get me wrong there. Notre Dame's defense definitely dominated Georgia's offensive line. But Kirby Smart just usually being a conservative coach to be so aggressive like that in this situation where we kind of talked about it, like we almost like this might be a good thing for Kirby, that like he's kind of forced to go back and play the style that people have kind of like always accused him of wanting to play, just being defense first and run the football, play field position game, which they definitely did not win the field position game. And missing Brett Thorson, the starting punter, probably played a role. Like it felt like every Notre Dame drive started at like the 40-yard line at worst. So Notre Dame definitely won that. But even just with how the game went, like, I mean, without that scoop and score or the strip sack fumble before the half, it's just like late in the game when Georgia's got that long drive where it's 23-10. Like if you're sitting at a 16-10 game, you kick the field goal, and now it's 16-13 with like 7-8 minutes left. It's like you have to like that you're sitting in a 3-point game and just finding a way to win with your backup quarterback. I think as well as Gunnar played, I think the offense was clearly limited in what it could do without Carson Beck. And I think the game should have been managed like you had a quarterback that was kind of limited in what he could do, especially if you're not going to utilize his legs like I kind of expected.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Like ultimately, it's not a bad loss. Like Notre Dame's good. Like that was the thing too, where I don't know if you felt like this. It kind of reminded me of the Alabama-Georgia game and the SEC title game last year, where Jalen Milroe, you kind of wondered about him as a quarterback at that point still, and you were like, Georgia, you felt good that Georgia should win that game, but Bama just, I mean, they had struggles offensively. They seemed limited in the passing game. Riley Leonard was not good in this passing game. He 90 yards total, 3.8 yards per attempt. Like, it wasn't like Notre Dame's passing game was dicing up Georgia. It was kind of in that weird vein where Georgia just, they couldn't score. And part of it was just the trench play, where that's what it reminded me of last year was Notre Dame, their defensive line just manhandled Georgia's offensive line. And I didn't think that was going to happen in this game, but this is a trench sport, and Notre Dame won in the trenches. And it's not like, it's one of those things, telling family here, and I think a lot of people here locally still don't give Notre Dame enough credit. Notre Dame and Georgia are recruiting the same kind of players. Like Notre Dame is recruiting blue chippers. Notre Dame is in the blue chip ratio. Notre Dame has a lot of talent. They have a lot of NFL guys on that defensive line and offensive line all across the board. But I was surprised that even with the upside that Notre Dame has on the defensive line and the good players there, they were able to manhandle Georgia in a similar way to what Ole Miss did. Ole Miss just had more offensive firepower to make that game get more out of hand, but it kind of reminded me of that. And I don't know, I did not see that coming from Notre Dame. I thought this game was going to be close, but I did not think Notre Dame would manhandle Georgia's offensive line the way they did.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like I think Georgia's one of those teams that, a reputation kind of team that people didn't necessarily see them for what they were this year, and they kind of saw them for what they kind of expect Georgia to be, because this is not necessarily surprising for what this team was. And so you kind of thought with Gunnar bringing a running element to the quarterback position, and like maybe that kind of manufactures a run game a little bit. But like the run game wasn't good all season. The offensive line wasn't necessarily good most of the season. And without a quarterback that you're just worried about, potentially throwing a 50-yard dime any given play, you saw how much a defense can just key on the run game and shut it down. So it was definitely disappointing. I feel like it's in no way like an indictment on the program or something like that. Like Georgia obviously has to be better. Like a bad run game, bad wide receiver play this year, but it kind of, and I know I'm going to be accused of being just like rose-colored glasses here, Georgia fan, but like ultimately I think this team kind of overachieved. Like they were the preseason number one team in the country, so that's going to sound like blasphemous, but like they had the hardest schedule in all of college football this year. And I even told you, I was very open about this team all year. They won the SEC and I still didn't know how good they were. It was like they just found ways to win games. And they also had some games that looked really ugly. They made some really average looking quarterbacks look like Heisman winners at times. Like Jalen Milrose looked bad more times than he's looked good this year. And he looked like the greatest player I've ever seen playing against Georgia. Like Haynes King just absolutely went off against Georgia. So, and then Texas, I mean, that's one of the reasons I still don't know about Texas, where I was going to get into them. Like Georgia beat them twice. And that's like the biggest thing on Georgia's resume. So it's such an interesting season. Like Georgia, it's like I honestly, this is what a take I had. Any Bama fan that ever tells you they're like heartbroken over a loss, like I just simply don't believe them. Like they've had way too much success. These losses don't hit the same. I'm telling you right now. I'm not sitting here trying to like justify like, oh, I don't even care, man. I don't even care. We win. It doesn't even bother me. But it's just like after the 2 national championships, I don't know how many years that lasts, but it's like, yeah, man. Well, dagnabbit, it's like, oh, I wish Georgia would have won the championship this year, but they didn't.
How was the family though? Is the family reaction all the same?
Yeah, I don't think anyone was really that mad. I think it was just obviously it's disappointing, but like I think the quarterback situation, like the fact that like you didn't have a starting quarterback, it's kind of like an easy like excuse, an easy kind of like, well, this isn't really our team. We wish we could have won without him. And then everyone also saw Ohio State play the last 2 games. Like, well, we weren't going to beat Ohio State anyway, so it's probably for the best. No, but I think it is
kind of funny. We've all just assumed that Ohio State's just going to keep playing like this all across the board. And I'm like, we've seen some stinkers. Like it happened. Like I don't know. I'm still not ready to just like pencil them in as other people are for 2 more games.
I don't know, man. I think Ohio State. I think this is just kind of what you were expecting out of Ohio State all year.
For
so
sure.
Now that you're getting it.
But I wouldn't be surprised if Texas beat Ohio State. We'll get into that later this week. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if Notre Dame beat Ohio State. It would surprise me if Penn State beat Ohio State.
I would say all of those would surprise me if any of those teams.
Notre Dame's a better version of Michigan this year. I don't know. I think Notre Dame could absolutely put Ohio State.
But I mean, Michigan beating Ohio State surprised me. So
yeah,
I don't know what Ohio State team that was that played Michigan that day. I don't know what's going on.
That's true. Well, Matt Green. Speaking of the Final Four, it's a good transition here. How would you rank the Final Four quarterbacks? Drew Aller, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, and Riley Leonard. Because I've heard different people talk about this, and I'm curious on your perspective because there's a lot of Drew Aller stuff where it's like he's number 1. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not there, but I'm curious. What is your 1 through 4? Because I think they're all very, very different and have very different teams around them. But I'm curious where you're at with these Final Four.
Well, the fact that we can't isolate all these guys, and at the end of the day, Will Howard is going to be throwing to Jeremiah Smith more times than not.
But we've seen good Will Howard at Kansas State. Like Will Howard was really good at Kansas State.
So I feel like just the quarterback performance I trust the most. I feel like it's got to be Will Howard. Like I just I like you put him in a different system. Like who knows? You want to have a whole conversation about that. But I trust Will Howard and Quinn Ewers way more than I trust Drew Aller. Like I think Quinn Ewers gets hated on way too much, honestly. Like I think he gets hated on. It's like a number 1 all-time recruit type of like hate. You know what I mean? It's just like he was like the greatest quarterback prospect of all time or something when he was coming out on like 24/7. Like, and he's just not that guy. He's a really good quarterback. He's just not the greatest prospect we've seen. I think he gets kind of judged differently because of that. But like Ewers and especially these receivers, like the last few games, I think Texas receivers have looked a lot better. They have that big playability. I think I trust Ewers more than Drew Aller, and definitely have what's his name 4th, Riley Leonard.
Interesting. So I disagree here. We agree on the first. I think Will Howard is number 1 for me. And I don't even think it's just Ohio State and the pieces around him. I think Will Howard's a good quarterback. And I think he's proven a lot that he's been good at multiple stops. He's been good with not a lot around him at Kansas State. And he's been good with a lot around him at Ohio State. I think Will Howard's a really good college quarterback. I don't care about the NFL stuff. Like he is a good college quarterback. Of the 4 in the Final Four, who would I be most comfortable with? And who do I think could win with any of these 4 teams around them the most? Who would I bet on best? Probably Will Howard. I would go Riley Leonard number 2 is who I'm probably the safest with. because everyone you look at the passing, and I understand, but
Yeah.
the guy's run for 15 rushing touchdowns, and his best year at Duke 2 years ago, and he wasn't banged up last year. He's rushed in his 2 best seasons in college football 31 total rushing touchdowns. You can't just discount Riley Leonard's legs. They were good against Georgia. He runs the football. He is a dual threat quarterback, so you can't discount that. So I understand the passing game leaves a lot to be desired, but I mean, he makes plays when he needs to. He wins a lot of games when he's healthy. He was really successful at Duke, and he's guided Notre Dame to blowout after blowout after blowout. He doesn't make bad backbreaking decisions. He's a gamer, man. He took some shots. I don't know. I think I'm more trusting, and I think Texas would be better with Riley Leonard than they would Quinn Ewers. I think that's a better team right now. So I would go Quinn Ewers 3. I go Drew Aller 4, and it's a distant 4. I don't know. The Drew Aller stuff is just you beat SMU and Boise State. I don't think it's been there all year. I think if you remove the 5-star pedigree from him, I think you still see it more with Quinn. Quinn, that 4th down play against Arizona State, and Quinn balled out towards the end of the game. Quinn was making some big time throws. The Quinn experience is all over the place. He does some crazy stuff, but he also you see it. There is some stuff with Quinn where it's just he's poised. That 4th down throw, he wasn't sweating at all. There's that guy. There is some real 5-star NFL poise from Quinn Ewers. I see it. Drew Aller, I have to squint a lot with Drew Aller because I don't know. I think he's of the 4. He's the last. He would be the last I would take, and I think it's a distant one.
Yeah, Ewers. I think he suffers from a body language thing. I think just casual fans. There's just something about a dude who looks like he does stuff nonchalant that when it doesn't work, when it's bad, it looks really bad. And so you're just does this guy even care? What is he even doing out there?
Carson Beck's kind of like that.
Yeah, I think there's guys like that just get too much kind of hate like that. I don't even think this guy cares about the team. He just cares about his NIL.
Because guys like Stetson, they're all extremely passionate, and it's there's no question. Stetson Bennett, he's a fire breather, and it's just some guys aren't wired like that, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what Ewers kind of suffers from at times, and I still think he's a really good quarterback prospect. Would not be surprised to see him be a good NFL quarterback, to be honest. But I look at us also we kind of discounted that Michigan performance, but after what Michigan kind of did to finish the season, going into the big house and just kind of blasting Michigan, he put on the same type of performance he did at Alabama the year before. He kind of balled out on both of those in hostile environments. But yeah, Drew Aller, I said this as kind of a prediction, and now it's happening, and I'm kind of annoyed by it. That the 12-team playoff was going to create more tangible wins and accomplishments for coaches and teams. So now it's oh, Penn State, look, they've broken through, and it's Penn State has literally not accomplished anything that they had not previously accomplished. It's just they had to beat SMU and Boise State to get there. It's that's all they've done this year is beat SMU and Boise State and Illinois. That's basically their resume. So they're sitting here at the top 4, and I still don't really know how good Penn State is. And Notre Dame, their resume wasn't impressive. They at least had the win over Georgia that, with the backup quarterback, that is more impressive than anything Penn State's done to this point. But yeah, I think the jury is still out on Drew Aller in this offense when they face the big game,
Yeah. But that's why we're going to play them, right? We're going to see how this unfolds. Aller versus Leonard and Ewers versus Howard here. Final thing. The
Ewers
Andy
versus his old school, Ewers.
His old school. Who could forget? They're going to talk about that, and it's going to drive me nuts. It's okay, we're being really generous here. Andy and Ari, Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman, they do a great on 3.
Hold on. Oh. Before we move that, was there any other playoff talk you had? Because I had one more take.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Arizona State Texas was definitely the game of the week. I would say. What are your thoughts on the targeting, sir? If I don't like targeting, but if that's not targeting, then I don't know what targeting is.
I don't think it's targeting because I think he went up. It's a clean tackle. It wasn't just he's going up because targeting is you're lower in the head, the crown of the helmet. That's not what that was. It was a big
Dan
hit.
Jackson against Texas, sir.
Dan Jackson's a missile. Like there's some plays where he's
I'm not saying
flying
he
in.
hasn't targeted before, but that one was the one like the receiver came like right to his
But
face.
look where his head is. I don't know what the safety is supposed to do in that spot. Like I generally have no idea what the safety is supposed to do in that spot.
But
It's
if
a
you look
fourth
at the
down.
safety-
He's trying to make a big play. Like his head's up. That was just I didn't think he was launching
but the
in a
safety
dirty
didn't,
way.
Like the safety never lowered his head. Like so, like
Yeah.
the safety, like he could, like, you know,
His
kind
face
of
is up. Like he
lower
never
his-
goes in like a little missile. Like his face mask is up. Like I don't know what else he's supposed to do.
I mean, he could like go for the body though. It's not like one of these where
he's
the
trying to make a play
receiver-
on 4th and long to get
But
the
it's not one of
Texas
these
off the
plays where
field.
like the receiver ducks his head last minute and then it ends up going helmet to helmet. Like I don't know.
I didn't think it was targeting. I thought it was I think it was good that they didn't call it.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy, but like if someone's gonna say like the only reason that was the call is because it was Texas, like I'm not really gonna argue with them, to be honest. Like
Also, Arizona
Texas
State
playing Arizona State, like
they should have gone for 2. Why were they putting trust in the defense, man? Like I just didn't understand that too. Where I'm like,
I mean, yeah, that's another story though. I don't know. I would feel a little bit like we got hosed if I was an Arizona State fan.
I don't know, man. You had a great performance. You got a big investment in the program. The vibes are high in Tempe right now. Dillingham gets an extension. Like, I think you'll be back. Like, you're in good shape right now. Arizona State's on the rise, man. Like, I think if an Arizona State fan, like, you weren't supposed to win that game anyway. You were, 2-touchdown favorite or underdogs? So, it was a great game. It's the best game of the college football playoff. Is it the best college football playoff game of all time? Or is it still Georgia-Oklahoma?
No, I would say it was a great game, but I mean, there's Georgia, Oklahoma, there's Georgia, Ohio State a couple years ago.
Georgia, Ohio State was better than that.
I mean, there's both Georgia, Alabama national championship games. Like, I mean, one of those went to overtime. Right. So
I think those were okay. I don't think those were
this
better
one was a lot of action. And Arizona State, honestly, they felt like the better team. Like Texas scored what was it, like 2 plays.
Well, hold on. Texas also missed 2 gimme field goals. Like Arizona State
missed multiple gimme field goals, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like their kicker is pretty terrible, but no, it was like the first drive of the game was like 2 plays, like 70 yards, touchdown, and then they took the punt to the house, and then they basically did nothing for like the next like 2 or 3 quarters. Like Arizona State like felt like they were like dominating like physically most of that game. That's why like now we've seen Georgia multiple times beat that Texas team. You've seen Arizona State felt like they kind of bullied them. Clemson definitely gave Texas the best game of any of the teams in the first round. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State just puts it on Texas, honestly. Like, that would not surprise me at all. Especially, I mean, just seeing what this team is. Like, they were up 34-0 on Oregon. Like, it's insane how good this team looks right now.
I don't know. I'd be pretty surprised if they put it on Texas. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they beat them, but if it was a blowout, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe I'm wrong. Matt Green, final thing here. Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, their way too early top 10 generated 2.9 million views, 1.5 thousand replies. This was wild when I saw it. I appreciate the boldness and not just going with a conventional thought here going into the offseason, but goodness gracious. Tennessee, spoiler alert, not in here. Texas 1, Oregon 2, Ohio State 3, Penn State 4, Notre Dame 5, Georgia 6, South Carolina 7, Clemson 8, Florida 9, and the all-timer heat check, Auburn number 10, who did not have a winning season this year, Matt Green. Still question marks all abound at quarterback and everything else. Top 10 preseason Auburn is you could maybe talk me into Florida if you're a big DJ Lagway guy. They spent big in the portal this offseason. Good close to their signing class. I don't have to squint too hard to see Florida bouncing back, but the schedule probably still. I have a hard time believing they're going to be able to finish top 10 with the schedule. But that's at least a little bit defensible. Auburn to me, Matt Green. I mean, what do you think of this top 10? Because I appreciate that they're going out on a limb here, but goodness gracious. No Tennessee. We're putting Florida and Auburn over Tennessee and South Carolina. Oof. And LSU.
Yeah, first thing I had to do was check the year. I was like, what year is it? Like, is this like the 2006 preseason top 10 or something? It was wild to see a top 10 without Alabama in it. You know, we see Florida and Auburn up here, South Carolina. Like, is this like prime Spurrier? Yeah, I don't disagree with like a lot of it. I mean, I have my questions about Tennessee personally. But Auburn is definitely, I don't know. Auburn feels like a dangerous team. I really wonder what the quarterback position is going to look like. Like, this is what I thought Auburn should have done a year ago was, go to the portal at quarterback, get a couple guys, see what happens, let them battle it out. And, maybe the cream rises to the top, like they have some legit playmakers. They've been recruiting a lot better the last couple classes. Like, there'd be more surprising things, I think, than Auburn, potentially breaking out in 2025. But I mean, Florida still has that brutal schedule, like in 2025. Like, if we're just projecting how they're going to finish, like Lagway looks good, but like, let's not like act like Lagway was like Deshaun Watson as a freshman or something. You know what I mean? Like, Lagway kind of shined at times, like almost like a Nico. Like he played a little more than Nico, and he put some more on tape, and he got obviously some good wins down the stretch. But it's still like Lagway wasn't just like balling out in all of those wins either. Like, I think with the Ole Miss game, he was like 10 for 20 or something. I don't know if I'm making that up, but I think statistically he wasn't like amazing that game. So I don't know. Having Florida preseason top 10, obviously Andy Staples is a Florida guy. Not that I'm gonna accuse him of being biased, but I think South Carolina, like I'm not surprised to see them as a trendy pick. Like, I think Lenore Sellers is gonna be like a preseason Heisman watch list type of guy next year.
I mean, for sure. But that's some heavy projection here. To bet on South Carolina, Florida, and Auburn to me is the more egregious. Like, I'm high on South Carolina next year. I think they'll be pretty good. But, sir, Auburn lost to Oklahoma at home. They lost to Vanderbilt at home. They lost to Arkansas at home. They lost to Cal at home. They can't beat Diego Pavia. We're guessing they're going to be better at quarterback next year. No Peyton Thorne. But I mean, he's 11-14 at Auburn. He's 2-6 last year in the SEC, 3-5 the year prior. Like, are we really betting on the quarterback transfer here to be? I mean, you have Deuce Knight as a true freshman. We'll see if he plays, but like top 10,
well,
like they recruited well, but like Auburn
this year either.
Auburn,
yeah.
I don't know.
Is the Auburn the one that's the most egregious to you?
Yes, it's Auburn, 100%.
Because I think there's zero chance Florida is finishing top 10 next year.
But at least you could sell me on it. Like, there is proof of concept a little bit down the stretch for Florida. Like, they beat a good Ole Miss team at home. Like, they hung with Georgia a little bit in the first half. Like,
did they beat LSU? They beat LSU, right? Down the stretch?
Like, there's proof of concept a little bit.
Yeah.
There's no proof of concept yet that Hugh Freeze is going to work out at Auburn. Like, the first 2 years have not been good. This is a gigantic year. He's got to win this year. I don't know. I mean,
that's true.
If he's top 10, then everything's working out. I mean, like I said, they're doing well in the portal. They're doing well on the recruiting trail. But you lost to Cal, to Arkansas, to Oklahoma, and Vandy all at home this past season. Like, that's a huge jump to fix a lot of stuff here with Auburn. And I don't know, man. Like, top 10 Auburn would blow me away.
Well, and we're focusing a lot on the bottom of this top 10 too. Like, having Arch in the graphic here on this top
they go to
10,
Baylor out of the gate. I think Baylor might win that game outright. They bring back Spavital and Auburn does. Like, I don't think they might lose that game.
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. But seeing Texas at the top and Oregon number 2, like Dylan Gabriel's gone. Like, do we know who Oregon's guy is?
Dante Moore, I guess.
He didn't transfer, right?
No. Yeah, Dante's still there.
So he is. I thought I heard something about him transferring. So
he transferred in from UCLA this past cycle. Oh, but you're probably thinking of Jaron, the 5-star kid. He just transferred.
Okay,
recommitted.
Okay, so I mean, maybe Dante Moore is ready to be that guy. It's like he wasn't particularly good when we saw him. The small sample size at UCLA. He's a 5-star prospect and everything, but like Arch has not started. Like we do this all the time and just assume, oh, the coach is he doesn't know. He's just starting the guy because he likes him and he's a senior. It's like Quinn Ewers is starting because he's currently better than Arch Manning. And a lot of people have their opinions that Quinn Ewers isn't that good. So it's not Joe Milton to Nico, but it's kind of a similar dynamic. Like Quinn Ewers is significantly better than Joe Milton, in my opinion, but it's like to just assume the guy that's starting behind the guy you don't really like people are talking about Ewers transferring somewhere else so that Arch can start. Like, if he's not starting ahead of Ewers, it's not like crazy to think that Arch isn't that good in 2025. Like, we've seen this guy start like 2 games against one was Mississippi State, right? Like, I don't know. It's just, I think it's so much is being put on Arch and how good Texas is definitely going to be with him. Like, we literally have no idea. Like, we've seen so many 5-star quarterbacks not live up to the billing. Like, I don't know why we do this every year and just assume that every single one of them is going to be good.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say the safest of the 3 at the bottom is South Carolina. I would say the safest at the top is still probably Texas. Like, I think Arch is like I'm just gonna go ahead and say that Arch, and that schedule is gonna be really nice for them next year too.
Yeah, same schedule.
I think Texas is a good bet there. Like you said, I think Oregon and Ohio State, they've recruited well enough. They're like, you don't. I don't know. Like, we'll see. I think Ohio State will be right there. I think they're probably safer in 25 than Oregon. Penn State's a big projection too.
I don't think Oregon is just this perennial top 5 every year or anything.
Interesting.
Like, I think this kind of came together and like this was a really, really good team this year. And maybe they're a top 10 team again next year and they're a contender. But I don't necessarily see Oregon all of a sudden as like established themselves as like the cream of the crop year in, year out. Like, I think it's not to say they're like not a big time program, but
they've also got a sneaky difficult schedule next year. They go obviously. They don't have Ohio State next year in the regular season. That's weird. But they get Oklahoma State early. They go to Penn State in September. At Iowa, at UW. I don't know. I mean, I think.
Do they play Michigan?
They do not play Michigan.
Okay, no Michigan or Ohio State.
No, they got USC late.
Okay.
They go to Rutgers.
They'll play Oregon State, right?
They play Oregon State, but that's in
Eugene,
so that'll
keep it alive.
Hey, I'm glad they're still doing it. It's weird they're doing it in September, but hey, beggars can't be choosers at this point, Matt Green.
For sure.
All right, sir. Well, that's all I've got. Later on this week, we'll do our CFP semifinal preview here and some other news and notes that I'm sure will happen over the next couple days in the portal with the balls and dogs and everything else. But anything you want to throw out there before we wrap up here tonight?
That's all I got, man. We didn't even really touch on Georgia on this list. Like, Georgia just assumed at number 6. Like, who knows? With Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, like, it's going to be a different look Georgia team next year. We might not even be able to bank on it with another difficult schedule again next year. Georgia at 6 might be a tough one.
I see what you're doing. You're doing the nonsense Kirby Smart. You're doing the Nolan Smith, the 7 and 5.
All,
you're
man.
laying the groundwork. You're laying the foundation here, Matt Green, here on January 6th to be like, look, I think Georgia's going to be lucky to get to set. Like, they're spending big in the portal, but it just, Gunnar Stockton, I don't know. I think Georgia might be a team on decline here. I think it might be, I don't know. I could start to see what the haters are saying. It might be more of an 8-4, 9-3 type year for the Dogs. I see what you're doing. I see what you're laying the foundation for.
Let's be honest right now. Like, this team went 10-2 this year with this schedule. It's next year you get Alabama and Texas at home, but you get and Ole Miss at home if they're as good next year, but you get at Tennessee. Like, the schedule it's going to be the same brutal gauntlet that it was this year. And I think the quarterback position is a reason to be a little concerned going into 2025, if I'm being honest.
I'm not going to allow this. This is not going to happen, Matt Green. Can't happen on my watch. Can't do it. Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you in a couple days.
Yes. Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.